All. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed, and we are in the KoolBeens Cafe. And guess who is with me as a co star today? Over here, this little thing. Can you see on the right or left side? Luffy, come here. So, Luffy is here today. He came back from outside for a visit, and I opened the door and he came in. So, here he is. He's sitting in front of my monitor, though. Luffy, how's it going? You want to sit here? Sorry, guys. When Luffy is in the house, then all bets are off. Okay, so time to go out for Luffy. So give me 1 second. Let me open the door for him. No. So here is Luffy. He does not want to go out, and he also does not want to be in. Okay. So he's going to start inspecting things over here. In the meantime, we'll wait for him to tip things over. So, how is everyone? How was your weekend? I saw a comment by someone a few days ago, I think over this weekend, about this chit chat channel. They were complaining that this channel has all random talks in it. Okay, give me a second. I have to let him out. You don't want to go and you don't want to stay, huh? All right. So it looks like that is our life today. Luffy doesn't want to go out, neither wants to stay in. So the door has to stay open and he will meow. So somebody was making this comment that this channel has long discussion of nothing. So they had left a comment for others to say, move on, save your time. So let's answer some questions. JLB says, hi, Dr. Bean. If the bacteria is present everywhere, what has changed or gotten so much worse, huh? Is it in the formulas too? So 4 babies became infected, ended up in the hospital, 2 died. There is, of course, some change. And this happened in 3 separate states. So I definitely believe that there is something. Although, as I mentioned, at least the companies are saying, not us. And I don't want to say that it is them if they are saying not us, and if the CDC or FDA has not said it, because then it would just be incorrect information. But this is definitely curious that number one, and give me a second, now I can close the door. Number one, why were we in this vulnerable state? And this is going on since February. Number two, why do we actually just have 4 companies and one company makes 42% of the formula? What other things, critical things, are in this similar structure? And then how come all of a sudden these 4 cases occurred? And if these are not related to the formula or to this situation, then what else caused them in three separate states? Is this normal? So the background, is this normal? Does it happen? If that is the case, then why so much of a reaction? So Rima says, do we know more about the infant hepatitis? So I am doing some more research. Probably I'll discuss it tomorrow. So there are so many theories now. Is it the SARS-CoV-2? Is it the presence of SARS-CoV-2 and the adenovirus that is for the SARS-CoV-2? I have Luffy's here everywhere. SARS-CoV-2. So the adenovirus in the adenovirus based vaccines, it is a variant of that. Did it break through, became active again, and so on? So there are lots of theories. I have to do some more research to be able to discuss it. Actually, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Um, Sometimes people become very insensitive. If you look at the comments in the other discussion, people are just simply saying that why can't they breastfeed them? It's not necessary that every mother can breastfeed. There can be legitimate reasons that they cannot. And if they also do not have the baby formula, then there is a problem. M. Gregory says, I just Googled, there are milk banks being opened if anyone wants to donate. So Alexander says, can Dr. Bean convince Paul Burke to become next USA president? I think so. At least he can run for it. Paul, do it. Doug says, is the bacterium in infant guts? Yes. So because this is a bacterium that normally lives in our GIT, so yes, when the infant will take the food or contamination on the food or the baby powder, that is when it goes into the gut, and from there then it enters the body. Cynthia says cat chat. Yes, today's day has become cat chat. Mary says we're all family here. Yes. So we this is an interesting place where those who know what it is, they come here and they enjoy it. Those who are new, for them it may be a weird thing. Yes. Does this bacteria get killed with the hot water? Yes. So the milk formula actually has a preparation in guidelines on it, which would help with this. Meanwhile, in America says, I love the chit chat. Thank you. Texas says, mew, mew, mew. Luffy random chit chat. Yes. He just randomly decided to be in today. Betsy, this is a good question. Does he catch mice and birds? So he pretends that he can. So he sits down outside in the backyard, and we have a bunch of bird feeders. So of course the birds come in and they sit down, and the squirrels are there, and so he sits down there as well, thinking he's going to catch them, and makes all kind of postures and does the walk. But he has fortunately never caught any of them. In the evening, I believe there are other kind of animals that come out. So one, when the sun sets, he would love to sit down outside and just keep looking around as well. So I think he can look for other things, but he has never caught or brought anything in, which we are okay with that. So Rima says, once you stop breastfeeding, it's almost impossible to retrieve milk production or resume milk production. It's physiological, isn't it? If you stopped, you can't just start months later, can you? No, so you're correct. The physiology is that number one, there is a disinhibition of prolactin. So normally, prolactin is continuously produced and that inhibits milk production. Then, when the milk needs to be discharged, then prolactin levels reduce and the milk starts flowing. Now, why would prolactin level reduce? Is there are nerves that go from nipple all the way to the brain, and that stimulation is the one that causes the whole mechanism to work. And so it is possible for a an infant to suckle on the nipples, and then slowly the milk can start um, getting discharged, but that would take once again weeks and months. And it also depends upon the emotional state of the mother. It's not that baby can just start suckling on the nipples and the milk would start flowing. Robin says there are lots of wild animals in the area. Yeah, so we get at night, I think we get raccoons and other weird animals. Maybe he watches bats. I do not know if we have bats, but he definitely watches things outside. Doug says new haircut. Yes. So it is actually funny. I was supposed to go for my appointment on Saturday, and the person who cuts my hair, she is she's I would suspect 80 years or above. Very tiny woman, very active, very energetic. And so last time when I went to her, I always go to her. I make sure that I have her cut my hair. And whatever way she cuts it, I always say, "You did a great job." And she becomes so happy. So last time when I went there, she decided to cut my hair in some other way. So I said, "Go do it." And then afterwards, she would do this. "Mm." She would, "You look handsome." "Mm." So that was funny. So I was supposed to go to her this Saturday, and then she left me a message that, hey, half an hour late because somebody else comes in. So I went yesterday, and she was very sorry for day before. She's so good. But yes, had my hair cut yesterday. Rima says, love that story. Yes. Betsy says, maybe young, healthy people should volunteer to produce breast milk. Hmm. They will have to be young, healthy people to volunteer to suckle on the nipples to allow this physiological phenomena to occur. So JLB says, rephrasing my question, already being present everywhere and attacking people with low immunity, wouldn't the reason be related to spike infection vaccine generating low immunity? So let me say it this way. If the immune system is weak, then any opportunistic pathogen can do. For example, we see the reactivation of EBV or other viruses as well in cases of inflammation after COVID or with vaccine. So yes, if you say generally immune system is weak, and now the question, why is the immune system weak? The weakness of the immune system in terms of when um, we have vaccination or we have COVID will be that immune system is busy with the inflammation. So it's really not weak, it is just busy, and it is possible that it's not able to handle other things. But at the same times, it can be overreactive as well, and that is why those allergies appear. This concept by someone to say that immune system somehow destroys the innate arm, I have mentioned it many times. That's just BS. That does not happen. The vaccines do not destroy the innate arm. Ashley says Dr. Bean puts lots of links in the videos to learn from. So what I do is, Robin, you're correct. When I am preparing, other than the books that I cannot show the pictures of because of copyright, whatever links I use, I put those links in the description as well so that you can go and check them. So this is a good question. And are there natural food products that can work like antibiotics for stomach? No. The only things that I've seen helping, they cannot act like antibiotics, are yogurt or banana and yogurt and stuff like that. It also depends what is the pathogenesis, what is happening, but no antibiotics replacement in normal natural. I am sure that there are tribes who work with food products and they know which plants or food products may be useful. At least in the modern societies, we are not aware of these. Do you hear Luffy? He's inside and meowing. Um, JR says Dr. Eric Topol was on PBS talking about immune escape variants and the threat to folks who recently got Omicron double boosted. What is the current data on the length of natural hybrid immunity? So I don't know exactly what he was talking about, but na- so far, immunity, BA2 helps with BA1, that is known, may not be as strong for Delta, but luckily we do not have Delta, contrary to many people continuing to try to say that Delta is coming. Um, that is one. Secondly, we knew that the vaccines can continue for, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, and now the boosters even are not effective beyond 10 weeks or even lesser. So there is a change in the efficacy of the vaccines for sure. Hybrid immunity of having, here we're talking about what? Omicron and double boosted. Look, the boosting, if the vaccine type is not appropriately targeted, then boosting 20 times will not help, other than momentarily ramping up the immune system. Do you know how that booster can actually help in the temporary setting? Is the following. When, so let's say we have a vaccine. So let's say this is the Omicron. This is the Omicron spike protein, right? So this is the RBD, S1, S2, right? And let's just make something unique here to say this is Omicron. So here is something unique for Omicron. Now, here we have a vaccine that is for a previous variant. And let's just make a tiny change somewhere to say this is a previous variant. And now let's say this vaccine that is targeted here targets less over here, less targeting. Even then, when you're giving, I do not know targeting has two T's or one. So even then, when you're giving vaccine booster, for example, for some time there is protection. What happens is that the when you are giving a vaccine that targets this thing, vaccine itself has adjuvants as well. And so when the vaccine is given, it will cause the cells to become active, regardless of the actual infection being present. The vaccine is acting as an immunogen. And because of that, there are lots of inflammatory molecules that are generated, which will activate a lot of immune cells. Now imagine the actual infection with this one, with Omicron or a different type of spike protein occurs. When that infection occurs, our immune system will become active against it. Because there was vaccine generated molecules and all those things, these would cause these cells to be amplified in their action. And because of that, these cells would attack more and they would make their copies more and they would be doing class switching more. So there'll be more activity because there is more inflammatory molecules. There are less regulatory molecules because the body is in that state of heightened responsiveness. So it is not necessary that the previous vaccine or vaccine targeted to a different variant will not help the new variant because it would just ramp up the immune system anyways. However, the right way is to have the correctly targeting vaccine. So, again, I do not know the exact context. So, without knowing that, I can't comment. But we know that the immunity will be there because Omicron and the next are going to be Omicrons too, or whatever next letter is. I have to hear that to understand the exact message. Iggy Pop says your haircut looks fab. Tom Cruise would be jealous. Thank you. Uh, and by the way, today I am overexposed and I know it. My cleaning crew came in and they cleaned and then they went and I think somebody touched the camera. I didn't have a chance to fix it. So I am overexposed a little bit. So my apologies. And I think my focus is a little less too. Alexander says, had Dr. Bean heard about Omicron findings its way to North Korea? Yes. So I was thinking of talking about that tomorrow, that how North Korea, it will be very interesting. So number one, regardless of how North Korea has been behaving, um, vaccines should be offered. I'm sure that China may offer their vaccine. But in the absence of vaccines, it will be interesting to see how that community. I read somewhere that they are now using herbal solutions to try to figure it out. So we'll see. But generally, those who are in who are able to help with the vaccines should. We'll see. Gregory said, what did they do before the antibiotics? So there were herbs that were antibiotics, or they would know that, hey, if you take these plants and you crush their leaves and you apply them on the wound, it would heal better and fast. So there were those, and I think that is how we started figuring out how to make antibiotics. Penicillin is an example of that, where it was actually not a synthetic thing, it was that fungus. So, of course, there are antibiotics. The only thing is, in the modern medicine, I do not know of those. GR says, thanks. You're very welcome. So, I invited Dr. William Murphy, Dr. Bill Murphy, who came in, remember, once before. I had a couple of questions for him that Dr. Paul Merrick and I had been discussing as well. And I'm sure that we all had some ideas and thoughts, but Dr. William Murphy is actually a PhD in immunology, and he heads a cancer lab and immunology lab. So I had requested his time to ask two questions. One question was, why are people getting allergies after COVID or after vaccines? And secondly, why do people get relapses? They become okay, then some time is passed, and then they get a relapse. So he had some beautiful answers for that. So I requested him. I said, "Why don't you please join us?" So he said he's going to be absent, I think, about a week, and then we will have him to discuss this. If you like, I can tell you a little bit of what he was saying, but I want to keep um, his message if he can deliver it. This is funny. So Mary says, my sister told me that her husband was vacuuming recently and decided to try vacuuming the 15-year-old cat, Maria Alina. Uh, mm, Me loved it. Would Luffy like to be vacuumed? That will be very interesting. Luffy loves to. So, do you know that he's such a I don't know what kind of a family member is he. So, he's so demanding and entitled. Do you know he does not go to sleep until he sits with me at night and I massage him and I do these things on him. And once he's done that, then 5-10 minutes later, he will go and sleep on his chair. This is his routine. He has to come. So I am usually in the bed waiting for him that he would appear. And he has that little bell. Uh, so I know when he starts running in, and then he gets his massage and then goes to his chair. So maybe I should keep a vacuum nearby and try it. Okay, so JLB says, tell us. Okay, I will tell you a little bit, not in detail, but just so that we can, he's going to present it himself. So I want to leave it with him. But here is what he said. Totally makes sense. So imagine somebody is vaccinated, correct? When they are vaccinated or infected, what happens is their immune system cells become active, correct? Now, in the case of vaccine, normally T helper 2 pathway, so let's say this is a APC, antigen presenting cell. This is a naive T cell, right? And then there is this T helper 2 pathway or T helper 1 pathway. And then T helper 2 pathway has this B cell that becomes plasma cell and releases antibodies. And T helper 1 pathway that activates cytotoxic T cell, correct? Cytotoxic T cell, or let's say CD8 positive or CTL. And these are helpers. We know this, correct? So, first thing he said was that vaccines push the immune response towards T helper 2 more than T helper 1. And this reminded me that when we saw Johnson and Johnson, which has really turned out to be not the best one, they had claimed that, hey, our vaccine actually goes this route, T helper 1 more than T helper 2. So anyways, T helper 2 more. T helper 2 pathway means then the B cell class switching and making antibodies. Now the question was, why do we get so much allergies? So he said, look, here are the possibilities. One is that when this whole structure is active, this structure, if during that time, let's use me as an example, if during this time that I am active with my immune system, and you know that the antibodies are generated for 3-4 months, correct? That means the immune system is a little more active than normal, because those cells that are making antibodies are also responding to inflammatory molecules and also producing inflammatory molecules. And not only this, and this is what he said, not only this, these cells are activating. So interleukin 4, interleukin 5 not only activates the B cells, they activate the neutrophils. Now, neutros are part of the innate arm. And when neutros are activated, then they activate other things. So it's not just that we made B cells and now B cells are making antibodies. This whole system is running and is active. In this system, add, for example, uh, pollen. And let's say the person usually does not respond to pollen. What that means is that when pollen arrives in their body as an allergen, they may have some response to it, and that response is subclinical. It doesn't really matter. Some B cells made some antibodies, done, stopped. But this ramped up immune system, when the person gets exposed to some allergen, now all of a sudden that B cells for that allergen is going to become very active because there is a presence of a lot of inflammatory molecules. Result is it's going to make too much IgEs, which will mean that the mast cell will become too much primed. So normally this priming of the mast cell because of this B cell would not be a lot, because the B cell itself for pollen will not do a lot of activity. But because now it has gotten so much trigger because of hyper responsive behavior or state of the immune system, that those molecules would activate it, which would activate this, which would then cause inflammation. And that is a reaction to an allergen. And now that means during this time, when this pot is cooking and boiling, you put pollen and the person can respond with an allergic outcome. You put dander or hair or dust or other such allergens, and the person might actually just respond to all of them. Why? Because the engine is running fast. So that is one possibility, he said. The other possibility was that let's say they were actually already allergic to some of these, but their immune system never was triggered enough to respond. And this caused enough of a trigger that these little cells sitting somewhere not really doing too much are now doing too much. That would also cause allergies to appear. Then the third thing that he said was very important. And he said, look, normally we ignore in our discussions that there is a T regulatory cells. There are T regulatory cells as well. The T regulatory cells are again of different kind, but their function is to cause regulation of the immune system, to kind of suppress it once it is done, control it. They say that when this vaccine or infection, mostly vaccine, because vaccines are built in a way to have adjuvants to cause this kind of a system to ramp up. So when they are ramped up, this system would then in turn suppress the regulatory system. And this is a normal behavior of the immune system. It's not about vaccine. It is a normal behavior of the immune system that when one arm becomes active, it modulates the other arm. It kind of suppresses the other arm. So when, for example, the T helper 2 are active, then they suppress T helper 1. And I think we did those discussions about 1.5 years ago. When T helper 1 is active, then it suppresses T helper 2. Similarly, when T helper 1 or 2 is active, then they suppress the regulatory cells. And when regulatory become active, they suppress these cells. Similarly, when acquired arm is working, it can modulate the innate arm to say work more or not work more and so on. So he said, it is also possible that when the vaccine related immune system activity is enhanced, it would suppress the regulatory system. And now that regulatory system was not only for the vaccine related inflammations suppression. Regulatory system, or these cells, T reg cells, we call them, T reg, these will be for other inflammatory states as well. So normally, let's say if I get exposed to pollen, T reg cell would simply suppress the response, and I would not even know that I'm responding, so I'm not allergic. But now that this system is active, it's going to suppress the regulatory system too. So when I get exposed to pollen, all of a sudden my regulatory system is not going to suppress it, and I'll get allergy. So these were some points he made for why people will develop allergies, or all of a sudden will have unmasking of the allergies. Then the second question that I had was, why cyclical behavior? Why 2 weeks of inflammation and then 2 months of nothing, and then again inflammation, and so on. And I think his answer was very, very interesting. And I cannot imagine why did I never think of that. And that was this. So let's say we have a vaccine here or something, some immunogen, let's say, which activated the immune system. So let's say this is a black box. Immune system is activated, correct? Now, when the immune system is activated, the regulatory system, the Treg system that I just discussed, that becomes activated as well. And its job is to then suppress this and bring it back to normal. Suppress doesn't mean to make it negative or, as some doctors say, innate arm will be suppressed. Not that. Suppress mean it is in the heightened state and bring it back to normal, regulate it. So he said, let's say we have a heightened state which is modulated, regulated by the regulatory system. What would happen is in the beginning, there will be heightened state, we'll feel the inflammation, we'll feel all the symptoms of that. Then the regulatory system will kick in, and we still have the inflammatory system that wants to be active, but regulatory system has suppressed it and kind of modulated it to say, okay, don't do it, stop, stay normal. And we feel better because the cells are not making extra antibodies, the cells are not doing the fights, and enough inflammatory molecules are not generated to create symptoms of inflammation, and we feel better. Then at some point, some other inflammatory event occurs. We get exposed to some infection, we get exposed to, let's say, SARS-CoV-2 again, or we get exposed to some other virus, or we get exposed to some allergen. We eat something that is inflammatory in its nature, carbohydrates, for example. And all of a sudden, when this new event causes this suppressed or regulated or controlled system to become active again, now this new controlled system, when it would start becoming active, it will suppress the regulatory system now. And all of a sudden, regulatory system doesn't have enough capability to stop it. The example he gave me was, he said, think about a car which has brakes that are regulatory system. But imagine if it has gone so fast that brakes, even if you apply them, they're not doing anything. So the engine was already simmering. It was regulated. Something else came in and caused a trigger which disinhibited, liberated the engine to go fast again. And in that process, it became so fast that regulatory system, even if it wants to stop it, it cannot, and we get a relapse. Then after a few weeks, it would stop or reduce again. And then once again, we are in this simmering state. And then once again, if something happens, it goes up. The problem in this is this simmering state, the pro-inflammatory state, the monster of the immune system's upregulated state, which is now captured in our hand to say, don't become active. We know you want to be active. And then we release it, becomes active, we try to control it again. That continuous activity is something that is the problem. So it doesn't happen in everyone. Not everyone gets post-vaccine injuries or lingering inflammatory cycles, but some do. And when they do, this is the mechanism of continuous relapses and remissions. And I felt a little, number one, I felt enlightened, educated, and I loved it. And second, I felt a little embarrassed as well that, man, this was just such a simple mechanism and I had not the grasp on it. So I don't know if I was just speaking to myself through this whole time, but if you were listening, I hope it was of any use. Okay, so I'm gonna look at your comments to see if Cool Beans are actually doing something else. Bay Area says, I noticed that the menthol helps too. The Halls has more menthol than the store. Hmm. Kelly says, good night. Good night, Kelly. Good night. Um, so Selfla says, what over the counter betadine, iodine, mouthwash, nasal spray products are recommended? So I usually do not recommend any single one product, but um, remember a few days ago, there was a company that sent me a product. So one second. So again, this is not a sponsored discussion. Plus, this is also not a guarantee, and I cannot really show it without this light shining on it. Okay, so this is an additional layer of protection against germs and pathogens. The name is Sofix RX, Cofix RX, and this is protects against germs and pathogens, long lasting, safe and trustworthy, made in US. It is povidone iodine. So again, I have no uh, it is not intended to be a substitute for vaccine, approved therapeutics, treatment, or a cure. It's just a nasal spray. So this is an interesting spray that they sent it to me. I have no sponsorship. They did not pay me to do this, and there is nothing, no other relationship. So just thought it is interesting to share. Texas Max says layer of protection against cat spit. M. Gregory has a very good question, and that is there a main hormone that influences inflammation? Very good question. So, not one hormone, but many, many events and hormones and inflammatory molecules. For example, general idea is this: anything that increases our body's metabolism or energy levels can cause inflammation as well, because immune cells can become active as well. That is why, for example, glucose or carbohydrates or such things can have a response by increasing our body's energy and excitement of the cells. Then there are actually possibility that the immune cells themselves are making inflammatory molecules whose job is to upregulate the inflammatory system or immune system. And these cells in turn can be activated by various triggers. And with the vaccines or with the infections, it is possible that the cells are just generally active. And then anything else you add to them, give them more energy or give them more hormone, for example, growth hormone, that would just trigger them even more. But there is no one central big hormone that controls this. It is immune system that itself controls itself through its regulatory mechanisms. But other hormones like growth hormone, insulin, epinephrine, um, the cortisol, glucagon, they all have modulatory effects. This is a good question. Are there substitutes for formula such as soy milk or goat's milk that would help mothers? Will a breast pump start a woman's milk? So, a woman who just had a child, it is possible that it is easier for her to start lactating again. Now, I do not know, because I'm not a pediatrician and this is a very, very sensitive area. I'm not sure what other substitutes are there for a formula. So I've heard a couple long haul sufferers talk about hyperbaric oxygen therapy sessions have helped them more than almost any other treatment. How would that work? So this week I have two things in my mind. Number one, to talk about hyperbaric oxygen therapy or HBOT, and secondly, to talk about plasmapheresis. So you heard Sean, he responded greatly to plasmapheresis, and you heard some other as well who said they responded greatly to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So I'll talk about them. Old school says, very interesting. I'm always interested in how and why the immune system works. That's silly for the poem. Got it. This is an interesting question. Carol Robert says, is it okay for a recently boosted person to use Nigella sativa plus honey as prophylactic prevention or if exposed to a person with Omicron? Thank you. So I have generally seen that somebody who is boosted is healthy. They do not need more things. Um, so, for example, I don't take these things very regularly nowadays. I might live to regret or not live to regret it. But generally, boosting itself has a benefit, and afterwards, um, body's training should help as well. Nipa, Nipa, you're gonna get me in trouble. You can make your own nasal spray with betadine, mouthwash, dilute and use. No comments. You are actually a dental surgeon. You should tell us. Meeple Art says tachycardia episodes might also be triggered if in inflammatory state, body ramping up to fight trigger. Elevated heart rate seems to accompany higher inflammation state. It is possible, yes. Plus, one should also see, is it anxiety? Two, thirdly, they should see, does it happen with the postural changes? If you stand up, it increases, then that is POTS. That is something to do with the autonomic dysfunction and or fluid volume changes. So there could be multiple reasons. It could actually be direct irritation of the cardiac tissues as well causing that. But the pattern and when does it happen are going to be different for all of those. Adam says, are the mechanisms for sleep affected by long COVID, post vaccine syndrome? I've had massive sleep issue. Yes, that is a known thing that the sleep becomes disturbed. Denise says, I've actually considered opening an HBOT facility in northern NJ, much needed and underserved here compared to, yeah, agreed. It's actually a good therapy. Doug says, good night. Good night, Doug. We are almost about to leave as well. M. Gregory, your question is good. I can't answer that. But remember, there are mouthwashes, there are nasal sprays, there are certain supplements. So keeping your immune system in good health is very important. Not an advice. So I have a question for the whole team here before we break for today. Um, I left a comment on the main channel and this channel that how did these talks help? And the reason for asking is not to get praise to say you're awesome. I wanted to understand what kind of topics helped you specifically so that I can figure out what kind of topics to continue with. So that is what I'm trying to figure out. So is it possible if you can respond to those that message and give your feedback? So Meeple Art says tachycardia after eating. No, it's not really just the food. Sometimes what happens is that if we our fluid volumes are not correct, then when we eat food, our blood goes to GIT as a natural process. And it would start helping GIT to move. It would start helping GIT with more circulation to pick up the nutrients, to bring oxygen and other nutrients to the GIT so that the GIT can function. So really, um, our body's priority becomes to take nutrients from that food that you just ate. Plus, the body does not want us to move about so that we don't accidentally just use everything that we just ate. Instead, body wants to pick it up and store it and provide it in the right tissues. So there is fluid volume reduction. So if somebody is already depleted with the fluid volume and then they have eaten food, that can trigger tachycardia because now the heart has to do extra work of pumping the blood to the GIT, which needs more blood circulation at that time. Yeah, so if it is random, that's a different thing. So the question for you will be number one, rule out if it is anxiety related. That do you get, are you, does the stress cause this, or you become stressed when this happens because you're kind of worried that what the heck is this? So that's one. Second, when you stand up, sit down, especially when you stand up, is this when this happens? Two. Thirdly, if it just happens whenever, so that is an atrial irritation. That's a sign of atrial irritation and autonomic irritation. And then you should talk with the cardiologist. Normally, they can put a holter to kind of understand when does it happen, how many times it happens, how long does it happen, what kind of EKG is formed when this is happening, to figure out what is going on with the cardiac stimulation. M. Gregory says many people get the tachycardia. Sometimes it's just after eating, too much eating can cause tachycardia. After eating and then starting to move about can cause tachycardia because the body is pumping blood to the. And I missed one more part, and that is that we send blood to the GIT so that the stomach can extract the hydrogens from blood, and those hydrogens are used, those ions, for acids in the stomach to digest the food. And so then the result of that is the uh, hyd- hydrochloric acid, HCl, will then be left. Hydrogen will be taken out, HCl will be left. HCl would then cause actually ACO3 as well. So the end result is will our blood will become more alkaline because acids are pulled out. Alkaline blood makes us go to sleep. So, and the reason for that is that when we are sleeping, our brain is used to seeing alkaline blood because when we are sleeping, we are kind of breathing less, and our breathing is shallow, less frequent. So carbon dioxide levels increase, which tells the brain that we are sleeping. And so brain says, okay, fine, close your eyes and sleep. Now, after the food, when we extract hydrogens from the food, and we leave the blood a little alkaline, that triggers the brain as well to say, okay, the person may be sleeping. And so brain makes your eyes start going to becoming close and make you tired and all that, which is called alkaline tide. So blood is needed to extract hydrogens as well. So because of that, our heart can start a tachycardia. So with this, thank you very much for your time, and please like, subscribe, and share. If you would like to support this work, there are links in the description. Buying Dr. Bean is the best. There is a link for that, and you can use PayPal or buy me a coffee or become a patron or use Substack. Thank you very much. I would see you tomorrow.